Well, I'd like to offer a very warm welcome to you to today's webinar focused on Abu Dhabi. I'm Mike Wardle, Director and Head of Indices for the CN Group, and will be chairing the session today. And as always, I'd like to thank our sponsors and partners in the FS Club who make it possible to run this series of webinars and to allow us to range widely across the fields of finance, technology, and economics. And I'm very pleased today that we're being hosted by the Abu Dhabi Global Market to offer an insight into the financial centre and the economic development of the city and Abu Dhabi. We have very distinguished speakers with us today. I'm looking forward very much to our presentations from His Excellency Dr. Tariq bin Hendi, Director General of the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, apologies, and Mark Cutis, CEO of AGGM, who are our hosts for our webinar. But first, I would like to ask you, the audience, a few questions to set the scene. We have 4 polls for you to take part in, and we'll hear the results of those polls later when Mark Cutis speaks later in the programme. So moving to the polls, the first poll question we have for you is, a year into the pandemic, what's the most important when choosing a place to set up a business in the Middle East? Please do use the buttons to give your poll answers. Either A, excellent quality of life, access to high quality healthcare, B, a conducive tax environment, C, market liquidity, or D, responsive regulation. So your opportunity to give your view on the relative importance of these things a year into this strange time which we are facing. I'm assuming that most of you will have answered, and I'm going to move on to question 2, if I may. So the second poll, what will become the one key driver of business growth in the United Arab Emirates in the next 5 years? Would it be A, artificial intelligence, B, sustainability and ESG, digitalization, or human capital and knowledge? And again, please take your time, but put your votes in using the system we have here. I'll just give you a few more seconds. And we're going to close that poll and move on to the third question that we want to pose for you today. So this is around fintech. Fintech firms will become more relevant and important than traditional banks in today's and the future digital economy. And we'd like to get your view about how true that statement is. So the options are strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. So please do give us your view about how important or whether fintech firms will become more relevant and more important than traditional banks. And assuming again that you've had your opportunity to vote, we're going to move on to the fourth poll question, which is about the role of financial centres and whether you believe that financial centres play a key role in fair market play and access, driving innovation and enabling growth for businesses and economies. And the potential answers are that not at all, to some extent or to a great extent. So again, your views will be really interesting on the role that financial centres and central organisations can play in pushing growth and market innovation. And again, I'm going to assume that you've had the opportunity to click on your answers, and many thanks for taking part and for your responses. I look forward very much to hearing the results when Mark speaks a little later. But now it's my pleasure to introduce His Excellency Dr. Tariq bin Hendi, the Director General of the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. ADIO is tasked with growing and diversifying Abu Dhabi's economy through private sector investment. His Excellency is also responsible for strategic initiatives that support the Emirates' economic growth and reputation on the world stage. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your presentation. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's a privilege to be here speaking to all of you and highlighting Abu Dhabi as one of the financial centers of the world. And we're focused on 2021, but we're also going to be looking at what it is that we have been doing over the last few years and what the potential is going forward as it relates to Abu Dhabi being not only a financial center for the region, but up on a global stage in terms of where it is our ambitions and the direction is that we're moving in. I'd like to give you a brief presentation on what it is that we focus on and what it is that Abu Dhabi has to offer and how it is that we move forward with all of our partnerships and relationships. And it's key that I highlight that one word before I get into my presentation, and that is partnership. Everything that we do, whether it's short-term or long-term, is based on that partnership model. And I'll explain that as we go through the presentation. So my presentation is about unlocking growth opportunities in Abu Dhabi. And I always like to start by quoting our late founding father, may he rest in peace, His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, where his focus was really around how it is that we could keep pace with growth of the modern world. And this was at a time when, there wasn't much here in the UAE. There wasn't much in Abu Dhabi. And if you look at where we are today, both in terms of hard infrastructure, but as well as soft infrastructure and what it is that we've created, not only have we kept pace with the growth of the modern world, in many ways, we've outpaced that, and we continue to grow and thrive in areas that we've set for ourselves as being very strategic for our long-term diversification as an economy. If I look at Abu Dhabi and the business environment that we have created in Abu Dhabi, there are 4 core pillars here that we look at in terms of why it is that Abu Dhabi is so enabling as a business environment. 1, we have a strong and stable economy. 2, we have a robust and established infrastructure. 3, incredibly business friendly and continuously seeking feedback from our private sector partners to continue to enhance that business friendliness. And 4, most importantly for us, is a place that residents love to call home. We are the happiest city in the Arab world. We are the safest city in the world. And that is a core testament to every other pillar that we have built to ensure that that is the case and remains the case going forward. Now, our focus has been and will continue to be around innovation and how it is that we continue to build this knowledge-based economy that we are so keen on developing and expanding across sectors and clusters. And we've done that through putting some very strategic things in place. One is, how is it that you build an entrepreneurial ecosystem without having an entrepreneurial mindset? And that is what it is that we've instilled across government, but also through the messaging to the private sector and the initiatives that we have announced. Again, we have a very enabling environment. The funding sources are diverse and robust. We have an integrated infrastructure. We have multiple research universities, world-class research universities, from Khalifa University to NYU. And we have a very diverse talent pool. And the talent pool is so diverse that we are very lucky that we have almost every nationality in the world based in Abu Dhabi. And that is a testament to how welcoming an environment that we have created. So when you put all of these things together, it's no wonder why Abu Dhabi is thriving and has thrived even during the pandemic. And let's look at one of the sectors that continues to grow. And if I go back to the point that I was just making about thriving during the pandemic, I'd like to highlight one point, and that is Abu Dhabi took a very strong stance right at the start of the pandemic, and that was that we were going to balance lives and livelihoods and ensure that the number one resource that we have in Abu Dhabi, which is human capital, was well taken care of, was safe, and that was going to be here for the long term. And so when we start looking at that across the economy and across the ecosystem and what we've built here, it's very important that people understand that people will continue to be our core asset and what it is that's going to take us forward as an economy and as an emirate. Now, if I look at the financial services sector, we have the incumbents, we have the legacy infrastructure that's been built here, the corporations, second largest bank in the region with FAB. We have multiple international banks that are based here, as well as the financial service providers here. But we continue to push the envelope. We continue to want to build on that asset management approach, that fintech side of things, the commodities tradings with what it is that has happened recently here and the announcement that we've made between ADNOC and ICE with what it is they've created here for our crude oil. And some of the highlights to that is that, and this is important, is that we are the first fintech hub in the MENA region. ADQ, for example, just announced the Disrupt AD program to fund 1,000 startups across multiple sectors, but with a core focus on financial services. We have 3 of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, as well as all of the partners that come along with those sovereign wealth funds that are available here to support companies both from a financial side and a non-financial side. And again, the list goes on and on and on in terms of what it is that we have created, but our ambitions haven't stopped there. We really want to keep pushing this forward, and we want these new ideas, these new startups, these companies, these entrepreneurs to come and be based here and help us constructively disrupt the status quo, but also help us build new industries within sectors, and particularly around the financial services side. Again, here's an example of some of the financial services players in Abu Dhabi that call Abu Dhabi home. Again, this is across size, stage of development in terms of firm, from startups all the way to household names as it relates to the financial services sector. But importantly here, what I want to highlight is that the government's role is very clear. We want to be a catalyst to help ensure that not only are we receiving feedback from the private sector so we can enhance the environment that we've already created, but that we can create new programs and set new systems in place, regulations, laws, you name it, to make sure that business continues to thrive and new businesses continue to set up here. And that's why this slide is really important in terms of highlighting how the ecosystem is working together. Now, from a regulatory framework and the opportunities that are here, I'll give a highlight of this, and we have a lot more detail. Once you contact us, we can give you some information on this. But again, we have a very favorable tax and financial ecosystem, globally competitive, 100% foreign ownership laws in place now, best-in-class arbitration infrastructure, and the list goes on. We have very targeted incentive programs as well. We want to level the playing field, not just within the region, but across the globe in terms of attracting that top talent and the ideas and businesses that they run. ADIO and AGGM are fully synchronized in all of the initiatives that we are running. Today, it's about bringing in those professionals. It's about making sure that we establish robust sectors in the financial services sector here at AGGM, and that we conduct a lot of these activities together collectively. And again, ultimately, there's a high-value business opportunity here. The public and private institutions are amongst the largest and most valuable in the region and on a global level when you look at the sovereign wealth funds that we have here. 6th largest oil producer in the world, high concentration of business volumes, and we are very strategically, geographically positioned so that you can access about half the world's population within an 8-hour flight from Abu Dhabi. And that's an incredibly powerful tool when you consider the infrastructure that we've built around logistics and transportation. Now, what do we do as the Abu Dhabi Investment Office? It's primarily 3 things. We promote Abu Dhabi, we attract businesses and talent here, and we facilitate from A to Z all of your business requirements to ensure that you have a very easy experience with establishing in Abu Dhabi. We drive private sector investment into Abu Dhabi using 3 core anchors that we have as ADIO, and that is the investor care services. This is your information, your access to data. We have incentive instruments, both financial and non-financial, and through infrastructure partnerships, which is the PPP programs that we have, as well as these new initiatives that we're running to get the private sector involved in the government activities. And this is important because the financial sector has a massive role to play in the development of that PPP sector. Now, from an investor care perspective, we provide everything: the data, the networks, the licensing, the real estate, the talent and visas, banking and finance. End-to-end solution, we can help you. It's to make it as easy as possible to establish your business here, and especially in collaboration with AGGM as it relates to the financial services sector. It's if you talk to ADIO or you talk to AGGM, it's like you're talking to the same team. And that is very important with making sure that the right information is delivered to companies. Now, the important part here is the incentives that we offer. A lot of the institutions that we talk to are looking at Abu Dhabi, and the first questions are why, what, how, and then ultimately when, right? And that's the great thing for us, is that using these tools that the government has provided us with on the financial incentive side, which include rebates and grants, as well as accessing equity through the ecosystem partners, it makes it incredibly attractive to private sector firms and financial service businesses, irrespective of their size and scale, to look at Abu Dhabi as a serious place for them to relocate and base some of their activities. But equally on the non-financial incentive side, this is where it is that we provide the access, where we support them on the regulatory side in terms of this feedback and this policy advocacy, and also looking at how it is that we can generate exemptions for them with some of the business requirements that they have. And this was the partnership model that I was highlighting, in that we are continually looking to enhance and improve the infrastructure that we have created, and we're only going to be able to do that if the private sector partners provide us with that information and feedback. And so this is a call for you to actively engage with us and provide us with that information. Now, we have a lot of information about Abu Dhabi. We have produced some incredible guides on Abu Dhabi and what it is that you can find out and the information that you need here, whether it's from an investor guide perspective or the Abu Dhabi prospectus, as well as the standard of living guides that we have. And all of this is available on our website, and we're very happy for you to contact us and be able to find out more information based on your needs and your requirements. And finally, this is how it is that you can get in touch with us. We're available. All of our folks at Audio are very keen on talking to you all, as well as the folks at AGGM. And I just want to end by highlighting one thing. And some of you may have heard me say this in the past, but it's incredibly important that all of the people listening to this understand that we as a nation and as an emirate have become incredibly wealthy because of the natural resource that we have in the ground. But our focus and our long-term prosperity is going to be built on the talent that calls Abu Dhabi home. And that's the only way that we are going to accomplish the diversification that we're looking for, and why it is that we're so keen on having these active engagements with the private sector and ultimately helping to build each one of these sectors, including the financial services side of our economy. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to the rest of this presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. Your passion for the development of Abu Dhabi is very clear, came through very strongly. And your focus on people and partnership was both clear and a really interesting strategic position. I was particularly interested in your thoughts about the balance of regulation, both to drive innovation, but also to operate a market which is safe for both investors and for consumers. And perhaps we might explore that further in the question and answer session. I can now introduce our second speaker, Mark Kutis, CEO of Abu Dhabi Capital Market, Global Market. Mark brings a wealth of experience to AGGM, both in the Abu Dhabi market and before that in international settings, including in Japan. Mark, you recently joined AGGM, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing your thoughts about the developments that are taking place in Abu Dhabi financial services.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Dr. Bin-Hindi. Appreciate the invitation, and maybe we should start off with the poll questions, which by now I think should have been answered. So the first one is, a year into the pandemic, what's the most important when choosing a place to live? And interesting, I guess the highest response is managing liquidity, and the second highest was the excellent quality of life. That's very, very good. Let's go to the second poll question, please. What will become one of the key drivers of business growth in the UAE in the next 5 years? And it looks like it's a close call between artificial intelligence, sustainability, and digitalization. Very interesting. Okay. Thank you. Third question. Fintech firms will become more relevant and important than traditional banks in today's future. So between strongly agree and agree, you have, well, it speaks for itself. And I think we've heard people like Jamie Dimon who said that banks will be obsolete. So being focused on this area seems to carry a lot of weight. And the fourth question, please. Financial centers play a key role in fair market play, driving innovation and enabling growth to a great extent. And that's 75%. That kind of speaks for itself. And that's ultimately the challenge for international financial centers, is to set a standard and also to do pilot programs for the broader economies to emulate. So thank you for that. Moving right along now. So Dr. Ben Hindi spoke eloquently about the trajectory of Abu Dhabi's development, its history, and how it's come to where it is today, and why these initiatives are important. And as someone who worked for 10 years at the Abu Dhabi Investment Council and started and managed an operation called Special Situations, I want to emphasize that this concept of people and partnerships was always critical to our success. Everything we did in Special Situations was in partnership with an outside participant, someone who brought us either core skills or also brought us capital. So this concept of people in partnership, which ultimately equals profitability, is kind of ingrained, I think, in the DNA of Abu Dhabi. If we can turn to the next slide. So why Abu Dhabi? And Dr. Ben Hindi talked about this, but I just found in the Economist Intelligence Unit this recent poll that was conducted to talk about which are the most livable cities post-pandemic. Not surprising, actually, in New Zealand, probably one of the smallest countries in the world, you had two of the most livable cities, Auckland, what's the other one? Auckland and Wellington. So 2 out of 10. And then you had the four big cities in Australia. So you had 6 out of 10 were between Australia and New Zealand. Interesting observation, given that they managed the pandemic very well, but they essentially closed off their economies and people were not able to come here. And I'll come to that in a moment. If you look at Abu Dhabi, it's obviously the leader in the Middle East in the way it handled the pandemic and from a livability standpoint. And that's important because during the pandemic, we had a tight lockdown here, but it was not draconian. So people were able to move around, and then gradually it relaxed. And while we were able to essentially enjoy the outdoors in February, March, there were people in other countries that were still kind of shut down. So from living here and observing how the pandemic was handled actually has given many people in the broader investor community the reassurance that there is a thoughtful approach towards these kind of regulations and these kind of situations, I should say. Here is what I call the cats and tigers approach to selecting an IFC. And if there's one thing you should just take a look at, is this slide. And afterwards I'll repeat, it's a variation of everything. What are the key advantages coming into the world of AGGM? The first one is common law. And the bookend, in my mind, for AGGM is you have common law application, which means people around the world understand the legal precedents. There should not be any surprise outcomes if you file a case or you're looking for adjudication in common law courts. So on one end, we have the common law, and the other pillar for AGGM is the regulator. So it's the common law and the regulator, which in my mind is smart, savvy, sophisticated, and business friendly, business aware. So we start off with common law. A is what Dr. Ben Hindi mentioned, access to capital. Some of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds are here, which creates the foundation for an ecosystem, which creates the ability for people to come here and interact with participants that know how to invest. Very important. These network effects are crucial. T is for time zone. Or in this case, let's say taxes, in this case taxes. And corporate and personal taxes are exceptionally low in the sense that they're zero. And that's important. And it's also important in a world where there's discussions about harmonizing taxes. The taxes in Abu Dhabi are zero because they've always been zero. They have not recently been lowered to attract inward investment. They've always been zero, which means if there is any push to harmonize taxes, which ultimately means someone gets pushed to adjust their taxes upward, it is unlikely to happen here because that would violate the sovereignty of the country. And that's important to keep in mind. S is for safety. If you come and look, this is, and you will feel it, this is one of the safest cities in the world. I've lived in Tokyo, which is also an exceptionally safe city, but this city, by definition, the way it operates is exceptionally safe. But the other angle and the other aspect that needs to be considered is the response to the coronavirus. Again, because it was handled well, because we had swift lockdowns and then gradual relaxation, people felt comfortable and we felt the safety. T is the one I mentioned before, is time zones. So time zone for a investor is very interesting because from here you can cover Asia and you can cover Europe. So this is a very advantageous time zone that gives you the ability to flexibly cover large parts of the world. Infrastructure, again, Dr. Ben-Hindi mentioned that. You have excellent infrastructure, and it's very, it's this thing that you will understand, especially when you come off the plane and look around. Everything is kind of the grade A listing, and it's fit for purpose. G is for golden visas. Now that's different. That, and I've been in Abu Dhabi for 13 years, that's changed in the last year and a half. Historically, if you were here, you would probably get a 1, maybe 2-year visas. Now, visas are available for up to 10 years. And why this is important, and I know the audience that I'm addressing will understand that instinctively. If you believe that human capital is the most important ingredient in your business, in all of our businesses, the ability to attract quality personnel from around the world that's unimpeded by onerous visa restrictions is crucial. And this, with the golden visa, this has made a difference. If you're trying to attract educated people, experienced people, and if you can give them 5, 6, 7-year visa, then they can say legitimately, I'm good, I'm here. Very important. E is for expenses. And if I may, this is the Mercer report. And it tells you something that, of course, everyone knows. The most expensive cities in the world are the ones at the top. But what's interesting is someone asked me to look at, to compare Singapore to Abu Dhabi, and I was a bit surprised because I remember Singapore used to be one of the cheaper cities in Asia, but in the last 5 years it's somewhat adjusted. So Abu Dhabi is number 39. And principally, if you consider the main reasons, is that housing is much cheaper here. And you also now have the ability to buy your own housing, which in the past wasn't the case. So going back, R, as I said earlier, is the regulator. This is a smart, savvy, sophisticated regulator, not a pushover, but someone that you can talk to that understands your business. And I find that to be important because if the application of human capital is important, if people are undertaking projects and investments that require rapid speed to execution, you must have a regulator that gets it. You can't afford to be interacting with a drone, with all due respect. And I think you'll find that. So for me, again, common law and regulator are the two foundational pillars of AGGM upon which this entire edifice rests. The rest, which is very important, is part and parcel of Abu Dhabi Inc., everything that's here. But brought together, it's the ecosystem that was designed to create this platform for people to come in. So, to talk about the environment and of business. So the key areas here, just again, it's a small recap from what we were addressing before, is the legislation and the regulation. Here you have independent jurisdiction and application of common law, which rests upon centuries of legal precedent, which is again crucial to understand that when you go to a court or you go to an arbitration, the application here is not going to be something that's arbitrary. It's not going to surprise you. Your lawyers will know exactly what are the foundational principles. And of course, these rest on independent courts. On the ownership and the tax environment, we talked about that before. You have obviously zero taxes. You have the ability to own 100%. You have an enormous number of double taxation treaties. And clearly, there's no repatriation. There's no issue with repatriating all your profits. The efficient processes and procedures I alluded to, the most important one now being that they've introduced the golden visas, and you have a fully digital application process. In fact, this institution, AGGM, was fully digitalized before the pandemic. So it's not sort of like a bandwagon effect that someone jumped on. And in terms of the world-class institutions here, you have large banks, investment banks, private equity funds. So you have a nascent community of both large and small scale players that are here. And I know the audience can appreciate the importance of an ecosystem, because that's the modern world. It's the ecosystems that we all seek to be in so that we can thrive together. Here is the results from the last 5 years. You have 3,000 active licenses, over 200 financial entities that have been approved. You have 16,000 employees on this island here, and the number of licenses have gone up by 8-fold. Assets under management are 85 billion and growing. And just to move on to, and here is something interesting which every institution I think can be proud of here. AGGM is the first jurisdiction to directly and completely apply common law. It's the first fintech regulatory sandbox, the first private REIT regime in MENA, the first digital courtroom, which again, this preceded the pandemic. This was not done in response to the pandemic. The world's first comprehensive crypto asset regulatory framework, which has been copied by others. The first digital sandbox with the regulator participating, and the first calibrated VC manager framework in MENA. So a lot of firsts, which signify that the institution has made an intentional effort to try to pioneer in areas that are relevant to today's world. We're not looking for what happened before, but what's happening now and where we see the future unfolding, which is consistent with what Dr. Tariq Ben-Hindi was saying in terms of the emphasis here. This is Al Maria Island, and this is a very interesting environment where one, people say you can live, play, experience, you can do your work here. So it's a comprehensive, all-encompassing area So where it's an island and it's right off of Abu Dhabi, so you can go back and forth to the mainland. But this is where we operate from. So these are examples of leadership events that we've had here. You've had the SALT group, the Resolve group for arbitration, and it's a sustainability group. We have a lot that's going on here, and we expect a lot more of these events, particularly now that we live in the post-pandemic world. We'll be doing a lot more in the virtual space, because we can attract a lot more people from around the world. So this is part and parcel of having the right people in the right place to do the right kind of seminars, and thought exercises. Again, you saw some other examples of this. This is a smattering of the firms that are here, broad range and growing. From major traditional banks, private equity groups, insurance companies, to a lot of the burgeoning community, the fintech, the technology community. Last but not least, our chairman, who's been the inspiration and who has executed on this vision, who knows Abu Dhabi well, which is important, because he's a hands-on person that will make the necessary phone calls whenever there is any issue that requires immediate attention and requires focus in a systematic way within Abu Dhabi. He'll make that phone call for the people in our ecosystem. So for that, we have him to thank for having been the inspiration to create this ecosystem. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. I did like your cats and tiger analysis, a very clear set of answers to the questions, why Abu Dhabi? And again, for your focus on people and partnerships, which has come through loud and clear in this morning's presentations. I want to say a couple of things about how Abu Dhabi is viewed from an external perspective. We run the Global Financial Centres Index, and just want to draw out some key points. First of all, that more people are assessing Abu Dhabi's strength in the GFCI survey. It shows a growing awareness, I think, across the world of the place of Abu Dhabi as a financial centre, and it's important that having that reputation spread widely. The second is to say that Abu Dhabi continues as the second placed centre in the Middle East and Africa in the GFCI. Obviously something to aim at. Becoming first is even better. And I know that Abu Dhabi is very ambitious for its continuing development as a financial centre in competition with others, and also through collaboration. You have a particularly strong reputation in Abu Dhabi among particular groups within the financial sector markets. So you rank higher when you are scored by people working in investment managers, fintech, professional services, and government and regulatory professionals. And it's useful to know that that's where people think, so people from those sectors believe that you are strong. And finally, you're very strong on financial sector development. That is absolutely clear in the data, and something which has come through also in this morning's presentations. And then turning to connectivity and the relationships which Abu Dhabi has with the rest of the world. This chart is based on who rates who in the GFCI survey, who it is who engages and gives an assessment score to Abu Dhabi. And as you'd expect, there's a strong relationship with Dubai, but also very good links with New York and London, but also with China and Korea. And that question of where your relationships are in terms of international financial business is very important. So without any further ado, I'm going to move on to our question session. We have a number of questions already posed to us, and we'll get through as many as we're able to in the time we have. But if we could invite the panel to join us, and we'll move into questions. Well, welcome, and many thanks for your presentations. That was very useful. So I've got a number of questions that the audience have put to us. And first of all, Mark, you mentioned tax and the whole question of the G7 and international tax agreements. And Mohammed Talab's asked what your views are on the agreement and whether there's actually a chance for UAE and Abu Dhabi to take this on and perhaps to charge more than the minimum because of the value that you add to investors compared to other jurisdictions.
So that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of charging more. My sense is that unless there is a fiscal problem, which means unless there is a severe budget deficit or some issue, I find it hard to believe that could ever happen, number one. Number two, and these numbers are by various organizations publicly quoted, the sovereign wealth funds here, and one which I worked for 10 years, but there's two very large funds here, obviously. One is ADIA and the other one is Mubadala. The numbers are staggering in terms of the accumulated wealth. So to assume that these will run out in any time in the foreseeable future, which will create the conditions to raise taxes, is highly unlikely, number one. I mean, highly unlikely. I give that less than a 5% chance, at least for the UAE. I can't speak for others in the region. In terms of the UAE trying to outdo everyone by raising taxes to be consistent with the zeitgeist, as they would say, of the age of higher taxations is unusual, is puzzling, because that would mean on its own citizens it would raise taxes for reasons that don't have to do anything with the UAE. So I find that also difficult. So I would give that this, you should never say 0% chance, but I would give that a 5% chance of happening.
Thank you very much for that. A question from Smita Luxman asking what the current situation, importance and role of international arbitration in Abu Dhabi is, especially in the financial centre aspect. And Mark, you mentioned arbitration. In fact, you both mentioned the rule of law and common law. And do you see any change in that, or is it simply that you're good and you're going to stay good?
Take that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a key question. This is a seminal question. Legal certainty is not something you ever, or rather uncertainty, you never want to have legal uncertainty. When you have your capital or your business at stake, you never want to wake up and say something happened. And there are jurisdictions in this world which are undergoing political turbulence, which is bringing a lot of questions to the fore on this point. So I believe, very strongly that this is something that is untouchable. And the whole point about applying common law in its entirety without any embellishments, very important, common law, is that if you're sitting anywhere in the world and you have access to what happened over the last 5 centuries, you can essentially figure out what a court ruling would be, or what the chances are of having a successful or unsuccessful court ruling. So this, I think, is an immutable principle.
I agree.
Thank you for that. So no surprise, I think, Mark, in your response there. And perhaps turning to more general views, Marina's asked what your views are on the unique entrepreneurial value that the UAE offers to business owners. And maybe this is one more to Dr. Tariq Ben.
So I think it's a great question, and we look at this from multiple angles, right? Today, yes, globally, there's a massive push for entrepreneurship, new ideas, a way to disrupt the status quo, if you may look at that. But the way that we are approaching entrepreneurship is we look at entrepreneurs and startups as really these catalysts for change, for growth, but also for really helping the incumbents be able to up their game as well. And this is an important aspect that sometimes is lost in the narrative when you start talking about startups. It's always about how are they going to come in and displace, rather than how are they going to come in and actually help with the ecosystem. And that's something that's quite unique in terms of what we have created here in Abu Dhabi, by saying that we want all of the major institutions across sectors to be part of the discussion with these startups, so that one, we can help guide entrepreneurs and startups. Two, we can understand what it is that their needs are, right? From access to markets, access to capital, and ultimately being able to source the right talent. Many entrepreneurs haven't ever built a business before, and they definitely haven't run a business in the way that a large institution may be run. And again, I'm speaking generally here, right? So it's incumbent on the institutions that exist here, whether they be government or non-government or related to the government, to help support some of those ideas and help drive them forward. And this is one of the core aspects where we differentiate ourselves here in Abu Dhabi, by not just buying into the hype of entrepreneurship, but actually trying to help these businesses move from an idea into something viable. And if I look at what AGGM fintech technologies and ideas and what it is that they're trying to accomplish, with what it is that global regulators will allow you to do, versus how proactive we are here in AGGM with trying to be that intermediary between the global regulatory infrastructure and also these new ideas that will end up being commonplace and will end up disrupting the status quo. And I think it's a great balance that we've been able to strike here, particularly when I look at what AGGM has done on the financial services side, with being able to say, listen, be prepared for this type of technology or this type of area yet. However, we will take a leading initiative and position by trying to drive that incorporation globally, and also work with these strong partners that we have in other regulatory jurisdictions to help drive that change there. And so, again, the policy advocacy side of things is incredibly important to us, but we believe we have provided for the core areas that an entrepreneur will typically suffer from not being able to have access to, and we proactively offer them that information rather than wait until there's an issue to have to then try to address. And I think that really differentiates and separates us from some of the other jurisdictions and programs.
Thank you for that. And I think in part you've answered a question also posed by Adrian Saunders, asking about how serious ADIO and AGGM are about true innovation. And he mentions, for example, harnessing and leading the growth of the digital economy. And I think you very clearly set out the way that you see regulation and the role of government as being an enabler of innovation and new ways of doing things. We've got two questions related to the plans that you may have for the future. Satha bin Safwan asks, are there any plans or goals to set Abu Dhabi not only as a dynamic financial hub in the UAE, but also across Asia? And Ian Harris in the audience has also asked to learn from the speakers how you believe Abu Dhabi's financial center compares and contrasts to others in the Middle East and in Asia. So comments about your goals and plans and where you think you sit competitively.
So, in terms of the broader construct of the universe, Asia, for instance. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's interesting because you're able to cover Asia and you're able to cover Europe. So this is a very interesting geographic location. Are we competing with other centers? Probably. But there's a lot that lends itself, being a lot of reasons to be in Abu Dhabi. But we're not, this is not a race to the bottom, as the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury said, right? We're not trying to take business away from anyone. What we have to do, and the benchmark that you have to evaluate us against, is are we creating a correct environment that businesses flourish? We're not going to know which business, and this is what Dr. Tarek was saying, we're trying to encourage entrepreneurs to come here. We're not trying to guess what the future is, but we're trying to create a platform that is welcoming to new ideas and to people that want to flourish here. So if you're educated, you have ideas, you want to apply yourself, you want to work hard, you want to be able to sleep at night and not worry that the rules are going to change or something's going to happen, you come here. But we're not trying to go after someone's lunch. So that was part of the first question. I think there was a second part too.
Yeah, so I think I'd like to add on to what Mr. Kudis just said, and I think, and this is a really important component, and it goes back to the question that he answered a while back, and that is this principle and concept of eminent domain, right? The UAE respects ownership laws. It respects the jurisdiction with which people operate. And in fact, if you look at what we've done with AGGM in Abu Dhabi, is that AGGM common law now doesn't just apply within the jurisdiction. It applies across Abu Dhabi. And so today, whether you're onshore in Abu Dhabi or offshore in the AGGM, your legal baseline to be operating from is that British common law or the common law regime that exists here at AGGM. And that's an incredibly powerful tool that does not exist in any of the other financial IFC jurisdictions in the region. So that's important as it relates to the consistency that people want to feel in terms of how protected they are. And I want to go back to a point around, the enablement side of things here in Abu Dhabi. And this is a critical part, is that we as institutions are also learning as it relates to where it is that things are going. Like Mark was saying, we're not trying to pick the winners here. We're just trying to create a conducive environment here so that everyone can thrive. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if we de-risk that experience financially in some cases, but also de-risk it from a regulatory perspective, a legal perspective, and essentially a talent perspective. We have to make sure that people are here long term. And so the 10-year visa, the golden visa, the G part in that tiger chart that Mr. Kudis was talking about is important, because not only is it a golden visa program, but it's a path to citizenship program. That's how serious it is. We are about making sure that people are here for the long term and are building this ecosystem up with us, not in a transitory manner, but in a way that makes it sticky and also makes it constantly have that ability to pivot and change and change with times, essentially.
Okay, we've run over time, but we have a few more questions. So if we could just ask for maybe one or two sentence answers for the last the last issues before we close. First of all, Elder Gabanati is asking, what are the newest instruments that allow effective and fast contact between the private sector and government? And again, Dr. Bin Handy.
So that we've created a lot of working groups between various government institutions, depending on the sector and the cluster and what their focus is on. And what we do is we bring in the private sector feedback into that. The government recently put together, well, actually not recently, it was during the peak of the pandemic, the Economic Collaboration Committee, where we meet with private sector leaders across industries. We take their feedback and then we take that back, study it, and actually make changes to policies and regulations. And you will have seen that in the UAE, if you've been following the news coming out of the UAE over the last year and a half, is that a lot of policies and regulations have changed. So sticking to the 1 minute requirement for my answer that you suggested, one thing that I do want to say is that the private sector is going to drive this growth and development. The government will be the catalyst there in terms of providing that capital or the access or the market participation. But the private sector will drive this. The government is very clear. They want the private sector to grow, to thrive, and to work with these incumbents that are in the market. And so we are putting together everything that we can based on feedback we receive from the private sector to make sure that that materializes.
Thank you very much. We got a couple of linked questions around climate change and climate initiative, asking what the status of the Abu Dhabi Climate Initiative is, and noting that Abu Dhabi is very ambitious in addressing key issues, and what is its stand in regards to climate change. I don't know which of you wishes to take that answer. I know that AGGM has got a sustainable finance.
Let me take a quick shot at it, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Bin Hindi from a longer perspective. It's important to understand that many, and rightly so, are jumping on this bandwagon, which is climate change, climate protocols. There's an active debate in the West about greenwashing. There's a whole range of topics that are being discussed. It's important to remember that the founder of this nation was probably one of the most sustainable people before sustainability became fashionable. So Sheikh Zayed talked about, the green environment. He was actually behind, LNG and to stop the flaring of gas. So this country has a long history in this arena. And there are multiple initiatives that are being rolled out, which over time will be assessed. But this is an ongoing process, but it's important to understand that it's in the DNA of this country. This whole concept of sustainability, including the gender issues and other issues, which he, again, to his credit, he pioneered way before, when he talked about tolerance, when he talked about, gender equality, when he talked about the environment. This goes way back.
And if I may add briefly, this feeds into that concept of human capital being what is going to drive the development of this nation going forward. It is not often that you find countries trying to wean themselves off of what many perceive to be their number one revenue resource. And we are actively in pursuit of accomplishing that goal. And I think that when you look at the ESG policies, and we're serious about these ESG policies, there are no buildings or infrastructure that are built without the Environment Agency, just as an example, Environment Agency approving these. And we have very strict codes around how this works. It's just one example. It is important. I don't think that the world has come to a conclusion yet as to what this looks like from an investable product point of view. And I think that you are starting to see a lot of money run into ESG programs and funds that may not be sustainable, but I think that this is the path forward. We have the most to gain from being proactive with this, and the most to lose if we are not participating when you consider the region that we're in and how warm it already is, and water scarcity and food scarcity. So this is incredibly important for us and drives a lot of our thinking on that long-term sustainability.
Well, thank you very much. We really are out of time now. There's a few questions we haven't managed to get to. And I'll make sure that those are with the team. We can get some responses to Amin and Brian, who asked about crypto asset registration and supports for blockchain technology, and indeed for Regina, who's talking about which sectors apart from the financial industry are thriving from an investment perspective. I'm afraid we've run out of time, so we can't address those questions live with you. So it just remains to me to offer some thanks. First of all, to you, the audience, for participating, being here to hear the presentations today and to take part in the discussion. Second, to AGGM for hosting the webinar and putting all the technology together, which has allowed us to speak from different time zones to each other. And of course, we hope that in not too distant future, it becomes much more possible to travel and meet in person. Third, to thank very much our speakers, Dr. Tariq Bin Hindi and Mark Kutis, for their excellent presentations and for their engagement in the webinar and in answering the questions so thoroughly. Finally, as I mentioned, to our sponsors and partners that I mentioned at the top of the webinar, but thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Ben-Hendy. Thank you, Mr. Kutas. We look forward to seeing you on another occasion. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.